Shwmai a croeso cynnes, and welcome to the What's Your Story podcast. I'm James Owen, a Welsh filmmaker and storyteller, and I'm passionate about sharing stories. This podcast is all about business owners sharing their journey, and we'll be speaking with directors, entrepreneurs and creatives from all across Wales to learn from their experiences. We believe everyone has a story to tell. What's your story? Shwmai a croeso cynnes to the next instalment of What's Your Story. And today on the podcast, I've got a bloody good human being. Today, we've got Em Melrose in the podcast studio. Great to see you, Mel. Thanks for coming down.
Thank you, and you've done it already.
I have done it already.
You called me Mel.
It's you and Mel Evans. Both of you in the same room. It's Em and Mel, because you're Melrose, Mel.
And I've been called so many, do you know what? It doesn't matter, does it?
It's probably a bit nicer than maybe what you've been called over the years.
You cheeky toad.
Well, Em is here. Em lives in Llanelli. I gotten to know Em over the last couple of years very well through some close business community friends, through True Connectors and other things. And Em, for those listening and watching, could you just share about the sort of work that you do day to day in 2020? Oh, well, it's 2024. This will be out next year in 2025. Tell the audience, what is it that you do day to day?
Okay, so I would best describe myself as somebody who helps people to, it sounds a bit cliche, but to live imperfectly, get really cool with who they are. And I do that as a personal growth and leadership coach. So I work with businesses to help them to develop leaders, to develop teams, to handle conflict and challenges and get the best out of each other so that their businesses can get better results. But my other hat is as a funeral celebrant, and creating that safe space for individuals to navigate through loss, to be able to celebrate their loved ones, and to help them to recognise that there is another chapter when we lose our loved ones, when our person is no longer here. So kind of two hats, but that bit about being a bloody good human being is, that's what I think my life purpose is to be a really good human being, to give kindness and love and support to us as human beings. Because at the end of the day, it is about communication. It is about community and connection. And so, yeah, if my one job is to be a bloody good human being, that's what I try to be every day of the week.
You're doing a good job of that.
Thank you.
It's weirdly complementary because you as a coach and you as a celebrant, you've got those skills and qualities that work sort of hand in hand. And I really want to unpack that story specifically of your celebrant. I think there's a real positive outcome that's come out of what is probably not a great situation,
sure,
which we'll uncover. But I'd love to get to know you a little bit more on the history, the origin story of Em Melrose.
Yeah.
Now, you weren't Melrose because
you
later got married. Yeah. But tell me a bit about your life. What was life growing up? What did your upbringing look like?
Okay, so I'm going to describe myself as Wenglish. Okay, so I was born in Bath back in the 1970s to beautiful mum and dad who enjoyed 50 years of I'm going to say married bliss, but marriage together. And I've got a sister. And yeah, I grew up as a noisy, curious, I'm going to say chopsy, but chopsy in a lovely way.
Rebellious?
Young person. No. I was definitely a conformist, but I had a curiosity about life. And if I think back to that young person of 7, she wasn't afraid to have a laugh. She wasn't afraid to... She didn't worry about getting things wrong and stuff. And I admire that little girl of 7. And I look back on some of the pictures, and even today, my eldest daughter will go, "Oh my gosh, Mum, look at you. What were you like?" But there was a joy. I had a joyful childhood.
Were you an academic?
Oh my gosh, no. My sister was the smart one. And I worked really hard at school. I worked hard because Joe was so good academically, I always felt like I needed to be as good as she did. And I beat myself up. I worked really, really hard. Academia didn't come easy to me. So every time I did a test, I even get a little bit of a twitch now when I think about having to do tests, because I marked and measured my capability on my academic ability. And I have to say, roll forward to today, I realised that it's not how smart you are, it's about how you apply yourself. So no, so I wasn't an academic, but I threw myself into anything and everything that I had an opportunity to do.
When you were growing up, you had no idea maybe of what you wanted to be. Your father was an engineer.
Yes.
Engineering maybe didn't apply or it wasn't attractive to you. So you left home at 18. What was the next for you as a young person in this world?
I didn't want to go to university. I was done with studying. But I was somebody who always wanted to be independent, and my parents recognised that of me. And I remember saying to my mum, I want to leave home as soon as I can, not because I don't love you and Dad, but I just want to be independent. And so I applied to a number of different organisations, and I ended up working for the best retailer of its time, which was Marks and Spencer, which is what brought me to Wales, hence my Wenglish accent. So, for the last 32 years of my life, I've lived in Wales. And so if I spend too much time in Bath or with, West Country people, you certainly see my West Country accent coming out.
Does the accent shift a bit?
Oh my gosh, absolutely, yeah. All right, my lover. And it's Gert Lush, that is.
So we got M&S to thank for bringing you into Wales.
Absolutely.
So thank you, M&S. Thanks for introducing me to Em. Brilliant. So yeah, you were 18, working in Marks and Spencer's.
Yeah.
That was like your first job in working in retail. You had no aspirations to go to university. And what was sort of life like as an adult in terms of career choices and things? What was sort of next for you in M&S? You worked there for a while?
So I was a of the day, it was called a young manager for Marks and Spencer's. And if we think about what that would look like in today's world, it would have probably been like an apprenticeship program. So I didn't have any qualifications. I didn't have a course that was associated to it, but I learned how to be a manager the M&S way. And if you think back to, it was too early for you to remember, but they were a company of very strong values and morals. And so I'm very grateful to the learning, on the job learning that I had in that organisation. So I spent 6 years of my early career with them. And then I went to as an HR manager for an independent store in Swansea for a little while, realised that wasn't for me. And then I landed, which took a big chunk of my career then, in the contact centre industry. And I loved it. People-centric. People have always been at the heart of all of the jobs that I've done. No matter what the industry or the sector is, it's been about people connecting, coaching, leading, and getting the best out of them so that we can serve our customers as best we can. So, that's been the thread through my career.
Did you know I used to work in a call centre?
Do you know, I didn't know that, no.
Yeah, well, that's... I used to work in a couple. So I started working in a call centre after my first full-time job was Domino's Pizza.
Ah, okay.
And did something different, bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
I ended up working in a contact centre in Llanelli. Llanelli has a bit of a history of call centres set up in dodgy places. So yes, solar PV. That was my industry.
Right. Oh, wow.
And then as I became a Christian, my sort of values changed. And then I was like,
yeah.
It was like you're looking for cheap opportunities, not cheap, vulnerable people to take advantage of, and then it
wasn't for you.
Wasn't for me. So, but I learned how to sell the hard way.
Yeah.
When I set up my business, I had to sort of untrain my thinking on selling, because I'd realised when I set up my business, the hard sell doesn't work.
No.
So that I had to do a lot of untraining and learn how to sell in a natural way.
Yeah.
But I did work in a contact centre.
The irony for me was that I was managing a contact centre, which was a technical support contact centre. And I do chuckle to myself because I have no interest in technology. I have lots of interest in people. And so roll forward to today as a business owner, when I'm responsible for every single aspect of my business, I do sometimes wish I'd paid a little bit more attention to how to do things, albeit that learning is probably not so good. But, if there's one thing that I think we can to give credit to people who work in the contact center industry is their ability to actively listen, their ability to communicate and to guide people, because asking great questions, getting the information from people. And I learned a huge amount about motivating, about developing, about growing people, because you've got 600 people in one environment and you've got, a representation of all parts of society. And then managing offshore contact centers as well was a real pleasure.
Awesome. So
Mm.
you did a bit of a stint in the sort of telecoms, IT, broadband
Yeah.
kind of
Yes.
space. You've
Yeah.
been through lots of mergers and
Absolutely.
acquisitions, and you were then working with a company which is known today as Virgin.
Yeah.
That was a big part of your sort of corporate career.
Yeah.
What is it like looking back now? Because you would it be fair to say you're not that same career driven person now? Is it fair to say that's where you're at in life?
Yeah. Yeah. I am very grateful and honoured to have worked for many of the brands that I have done, to have worked some incredible leaders, directors, executives, both worked for them, worked alongside them. I feel really honoured to do that. Um, and the learning that that brought me. But as situations happen through life, they take you to a point where you say, okay, let me just take stock of what is my purpose? What do I want that direction to be? And be that life events, be that situations that happen that give you that space just to take stock and go, well, what is my next step? And so I'm really grateful for the career that I had, the learning, the experiences, the bruises, the scars, the successes, the did I really do that moments, to bring me to where I am today, because it's all part of the rich tapestry of life.
Great. And whenever I talk about you, I do talk about you a lot to people in the business world, and you'll quite often hear, "Oh, Em who used to work in DVLA." You got a bit of a reputation because you worked a long time in the DVLA
Yeah.
before you set up the business. So let's talk back to your DVLA days, and this is going back now a couple of years.
Yes.
The girls are now born at this point.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
married with
Yes.
Don.
Yeah.
Talk me through that process because you were the breadwinner where Don was setting up his own business.
Yeah, yeah. So it was a bittersweet time, I think it'd be fair to say. So I had been working for IBM. We were managing the IT contract there, and I was part of a significant team, a beautiful team to work with, where we were transitioning the IT services back to DVLA's ownership. So that was a challenging time. Learned huge amounts of about myself and with others. And then at a crossroads, did I stay with the organisation that I was working for at the time, which would have meant me travelling globally, potentially. Sorry, but the girls were just coming into that comprehensive time, and as a mum, think about puberty, think about boyfriends and life and stuff like it's not really fair to leave all of that to Don. So I felt like I wanted to be at home. So my plan would be 5 years, spend some time in a different sector whilst I'd worked in or worked alongside. I hadn't worked in the public sector, and thought, well, that'd be a good place to gain some additional experience. But what I recognised of myself, and in reflection now, is that my leadership style wasn't necessarily what the organisation needed of me at that time. And sometimes we've got to take a long look at whether the organisation is right for us, the culture's right for us, whether we're right for it. And so it was a time for me to leave. But I'm really blessed, and I have a very strong spiritual belief. I have a belief that the universe delivers things to us at a certain time. We might not know where it's going to at that moment in time, but I think I'm grateful that, ironically, that the situations fell out as they did, because it really changed the way with which I was able to be present for my family in the next 2 or 3 years, and how things unfolded.
Brilliant. So you left the life of public sector,
I did.
probably a good pension, to maybe take on a new venture,
Yeah.
which was joined on.
It was, yeah. So Don had been a business coach serving, the South Wales SME community for many years, and as somebody who was very passionate about disc profiling, Don and I were the yin to each other's yang. Okay, so we were going to be a perfect blend to be able to go and serve the SME community, and that had been our intention. And some deep breaths, some squeaky bum moments, thinking, "Oh crikey, is this gonna work?" But it was the right time to do that. But the universe had a different path for us to take, because in just at the time that I was making those final decisions to leave the organisation, Don was diagnosed with throat cancer. He'd been really well. There'd been nothing wrong with him. And yeah, so that meant that all that we had planned was going to take quite a different direction.
And this is 2018.
Yeah, so November 2018, he wasn't well, and it was January 2019 that he was diagnosed with throat cancer. Yeah.
And just before COVID.
Thank goodness, yes. So there was a blessing that he went through all of his initial treatment, radiotherapy, immunotherapy, before COVID hit. And I have to say that was a blessing. The treatment continued during that time, but that intense initial period, it was pre-COVID, yeah.
And Don Melrose was somebody who, despite his circumstances, was still very loyal and committed to his customers, and he still worked. He didn't take a day off, by the sounds of it.
No, he didn't. He was, if there was, I've got real admiration for him, because for anybody that knew him, he wasn't shy at speaking his truth. He would always say to me, "I'm not nice." He said, because if I'm nice to people, that would suggest that there's nothing in me that cares enough. He said, "I care passionately and deeply. And sometimes I'm going to tell you that your baby's ugly." And from a business perspective, he had a way of putting things. And sometimes for me, as a bit of an empath, I'd go, "Oh gosh, did you really say that?" But he was a very articulate man. And for him to have had throat cancer, to lose his voice, was really hard. But I remember when he was at the hospice and he lost his ability to speak, and the only way that he could engage was through writing. And I was speaking to Helen Fielding, the consultant, and she would say, "I absolutely understand how Don's feeling," because you could see the speed with which he was writing, or the pressure that he was writing with. And he still articulated himself in his dry, witty way, in written word. And I've still got those books today, that not that I look at them, but there's an essence of what his character was. He didn't lose that. It was quite incredible, given the amount of medication that he was on towards the end. But I think it was probably 3 or 4 weeks before he passed, he was still caring and engaging with those clients that he cared deeply about. As quite admirable.
So unfortunately, Don passed away. He lost that battle, which is sad to hear about it. And I think the sad part for me is that I never got to meet this man. And I hear so many good things about him in the business community and through friends. And yeah, it would have been an absolute joy. But what was that like for you as a mother, as somebody who had a very secure job, wanting to start this business? What did that sort of journey look like to start to unpack the grief you were then experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, so when we found out that Don's cancer was incurable, the truth of it is, grief starts then, because you're already starting to imagine there's going to come a point in time when life is different. And when anything changes, there's a part of us that grieves what we had. That could be, changing jobs, or, having an argument with a friend, or losing a friendship. So, grief can show up in many, many, many different ways. And for me, I had a period of time to start to, I am a very visual person, visualize what life might begin to look like. And that was tough, because that's all head work, and perhaps conversations that I wasn't having. So yeah, I hadn't expected this to be the way. So when Don ultimately passed, and I'm there in it living it in its truest sense, um, taking time out to think about, well, what was my identity? Because you're right, I was a breadwinner, I was a wife, I was, I was his partner. Physically, I was his partner. I was a mum, but I was co-parenting, and all of a sudden, I'm a single mum. I'm a widow. I'm no longer a corporate career lady because I chose to leave that path. I was now responsible for a business. Blinking heck, there was a lot of stuff to process, and at that time, I reached out to a very cherished friend of mine, who I now call my little brother, but also an extremely competent coach, Adam Brooks, and did a whiteboard session with him and went, right, okay, so this is almost a blank sheet of paper. This is the next chapter to write, and it's mine to write and mine to own. And how am I going to make good of what's happened? And I am a half full girl.
That's true.
I am absolutely a half full girl. I would like to say I'm more grounded at times, but I am a half full girl. So I know that to sit back and to wallow, I needed that time. I took some time out to think and to reflect, and and I had plenty of snotty tissue moments and duvet days, and I needed to have that time to go, okay, but when I'm ready to get back on the horse now. In January 2022, January 21st, 2022, I remember that was a day that I got into the whiteboard session with Adam and go, okay, how do we take all of that learning? How do we take all of the knowledge, the experience, the things that you've learned, and how are we going to enable you to take this next chapter forward? It's like, okay.
In terms of financial planning,
Yeah.
okay, I'm 29 and I've just taken out a pension. I'm very excited about that because I've been in business for 5 years and I've never had a pension.
Yeah.
I would have had a typical employer's pension through your obligations through your employer, but there's probably not very much in those pensions from the jobs I've had. And it's been quite difficult for me as a business owner to find somebody who can help me with that because, in all honesty, as a small business owner, the barriers for investing in a pension have been significantly high. And only a couple of weeks ago, I reached out to one guy who's recommended by several people, and he said the minimum investment was 100K. Right now, I'm someone who doesn't have anything. I need to just start somewhere. Just need to start putting money into a pension. And not just me, my wife as well. Me and Amy both only work in Stori Cymru. So, you've had some good financial advice and some good financial planning. And even though it's been, a very, very tough thing to go through, really, really challenging, thankfully, through good financial planning, you've sort of had the best out of that situation.
Absolutely. I mean, I've worked with some big organizations, but you don't think at the age of, up to the age of our 30s, we don't think, oh, I'm going to put into my pension. My financial advisor would say, always take 10% of your salary and save it. Wherever it goes, just save it. So, there's a good point there. And so I'm saying to my girls, right, 10% of your salary, wherever it goes, just start saving it. But when we're well, that's the time when we want to make sure that we've got these things in place. So we have pet insurance, right? We have mobile phone insurance, but do we put life insurance in place? Do we put mortgage protection planning in place? I am so glad that I listened. And whilst it was an outgoing when the girls were young, I'm really glad that we put that in place, because now I've got a bit of an air gap. It gave me a bit of an air gap to go, well, what do I need to do? I've still got responsibilities. I'm still a mum. I need to, I am the breadwinner. I've got responsibilities. But if we don't, if I hadn't have put those things in place, I dread to think what it would have felt like.
So you get back on the horse. You want to start this new challenge, this new venture. You meet up with Adam to do a bit of a whiteboard session. And where does that lead you in this sort of new season of life post-on?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, it was, let's think about how you can serve the business community. So, I had a lot of wealth and experience in leadership, management, coaching. So that was a very natural thing to do. I'd already started to learn more about behavioural profiling. So that I kind of started to cut myself a little bit of a niche in that space, got out there, started to do networking. The real difference was I was known, right? I was known in IBM, or, people go, oh yeah, I remember you from DVLA, or remember you from NTL days, or remember you from Marks and Spencer. So I was known. I had this identity, and all of a sudden I was needing to create that for myself. So going out into the business networking environments and going and needing to do a 60 seconds on what you're about. If I think back to what I stood up and did then to who I am now, I didn't really, even back in January 2022, I didn't know who Em Melrose was. I've had to grow into her. I've had to actually love her imperfectness now, if there is such a word. So it was about personal growth and leadership coaching because that felt very familiar to me. And I embarked on doing my LM7 in executive coaching. I became an NLP practitioner. I was starting to think about how I could use my skill as a Reiki master in that space. So, but it's a tough gig, right? It is a tough gig because you've got all these things that you've suddenly got to do. And I had a huge team of people around me in the past, and all of a sudden it's you. And that can be quite lonely. So
yeah, you've gone from managing a contact center of 600 people offshore India, and then it's just you.
Yeah, and that's daunting. That's daunting in it. Really exploring your belief system. The values that you have, the kind of people that you want to surround yourself with, to enable you to achieve stuff. They say so much your net worth in your network, right? There's a lot of talk about that. The people that you surround yourself with is so important, and you attract beautiful people into your life. I consider you to be part of that. And then others just, they were with you for a period of time, and and that starts to change. So yeah, and for me as a coach, one of the beautiful things about it is I'm always learning. We're always learning every day. It's this cliche of every day is a learning day, but
yeah,
I can't know everything, right? And my role as a coach is to create psychological safety for people to unpack and identify what's within them that they want to achieve. We've all got the answers within us. And that for me is a really privileged place to be when somebody has that aha moment. Like, oh my God, I hadn't seen it,
So you got two hats on day to day. You got your coach hat. So at what point were you where you discovered you could be a celebrant? Because that was probably something that was never on your radar.
Oh my word, never. If I think back to my 40s, there was absolutely no way, and I was thinking forward to this decade in 50, would I have thought that I was going to be a funeral celebrant? No. And it's really fascinating the way it came about. So when Don had always said that everybody deserves a good send-off, so no pressure there then. And it really mattered that I found somebody who would be able to honour him, and Dinah came into my life, and we together co-created, with the help of Phil, a beautiful service for Don. And at the end of it, we laughed, we cried, and people came to me and said, Em, that was beautiful, and we really enjoyed it. Is that okay to enjoy it? I said, absolutely, that's what we wanted. Roll forward to kind of 6-7 months later, I take a phone call from Matthew Sims, who was our funeral director, and he said, Em, you know how Dad's got funeral service? Yeah. Well, if he was looking for somebody to deliver a service for him, would you? Wow, I never really thought about it. He said, well, yeah, but would you? Well, yeah, but I'm not trained to do it. We don't need to be trained. Now, if I'm going to do something, I don't do a half-assed job. I'm in it. And again, call it synchronicity, call it universal direction, call it whatever you like. Dinah, who had been my celebrant for Don, was running coaching to become a funeral celebrant. Thought, do you know what? I'm going to go do it. And so it's happened that way. It's evolved. I am very privileged to have delivered services for people. It's organic, it's going to grow. But what it does is it helps me to help other people, because I am walking with grief. We don't, we don't do grief. It doesn't stop. It's something that we walk with. And I feel the combination of my ability to listen, my coaching skills, my ability to create that space for people just to express what they feel enables me to translate those skills into being a celebrant. And I love storytelling. I love that ability to be able to hear what somebody says and then play it back to them, and to hold that space, because to be able to do that, to be able to, in those 20, 30 minutes that you have in a service, to honor that person's life, oh my gosh, so humbling.
It sounds like something that, in all honesty, in a business sense, I mean, you've got funeral directors, right, that run businesses, but it probably sounds like with you both hats on, that you're not going to put so much bread on the table doing your celebrant, but it's something that is something very rewarding and something you can
Oh,
give back.
hugely so. We'll often talk, well, I will talk to people about my emotional bank account and my business bank account, okay, my financial bank account. They need to work in equal measures. We've all got needs that we have to meet, right? Um, but life is precious. Nobody's promised tomorrow. And what your celebrant does, which is what I've called I kind of describe myself as your celebrant. What that does is it feeds my soul account. I feel like I've got a real purpose. And the truth of it is we're all going to die at some point. And if I can do something to help and ease people through that, we're all walking our own different paths. Grief is different for absolutely everybody, but there's a deeper compassion that I think I can bring. Because and I will be right for some people. I love a good cup of tea. I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and that's fine. But we don't talk about death. We don't talk about loss. We don't talk about we hide behind things. You don't put a pension in place because I don't need that. I'm still young. I'm still well. But what would happen to Amy if some of those things weren't in place? And if I can just do some things to help educate and inform and bring a bit of peace, then do you know what? It can make a difference.
Well, funnily enough, I do most of the paperwork and the bills. So she'd be like you. You didn't know what to do. Don did the car insurance, and you had to teach the girls how to drive, which was Don's job.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it was. I didn't sign up for that, James. When we had kids, I did not sign up to do the driving practice. But do you know what? When you are faced in those situations, you find a level of resilience. You tap into skills that you think that you don't have. And I miss Don's physical presence every day, but the lessons that he taught and the knowledge that he shared with me lives on. And I feel a real privilege to be able to do that with other people. And there is a new chapter. I have a new partner in my life. I feel very blessed to be able to do that. And for me, it is about I feel my role as a personal growth and leadership coach and a celebrant is to show up authentically to people. I don't get it right all the time. If I get it right 60% of the time, brilliant. But social media, pressure, all of we've got to a point where we've moved so far away from being authentic and being imperfect. And so if I can just do a little bit of that, and it helps other people with tools and techniques that I've learned, and maybe, we can just be a little bit kinder to each other. We can be kinder to ourselves. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. I feel blessed. I feel sad that things didn't turn out as perhaps my little princess rose tinted glasses half full cup would have happened. But I feel very blessed for every single person that's been in my life and the path that we've walked. And I feel blessed with the ability to write whatever that chapter unfolds, the next paragraph. Who knows, not thinking so much into the future, but now being present, being available to people.
Great. Well, from one storyteller to another, I'd love to ask you, whose story would you love to hear? If you could sit in a chair with somebody, whether it's here or at home, and you could have a camera and have a microphone to really capture that conversation, whose story would you love to hear?
Oh my goodness, there are so many stories.
That could be somebody influential, somebody inspirational, Dinah's story.
I do. I do know Dinah's story. Do you know, I think if I had an opportunity to, I'd love to have, I'd love to know my gran story. My gran was a wise old soul, and quite often I find myself reflecting, if only I had had the opportunity to sit down and say, Gran, tell me your story. So there are loads of people, I could say Brené Brown. I could tell you the famous people. I could go, oh, I'd love to sit down with Gandhi, or I'd love to sit down and have a conversation with, Miranda Hart, people that give me a good old belly laugh. But actually, do you know what? I'd love to have sat down with my gran. I'd love to be able to have done that with my mum and my dad. They both of them passed in 2019. And if there was one piece of advice I would give to people, is take a moment to ask them their story. This is beautiful. What is our story? Gran, what was your story? Mum, Dad, tell me, because we look back and we're part of their story. They're part of our story. So yeah, it would be my gran.
Absolutely. Great. Lovely to hear. Lovely tribute. And as we close, I would love to know, I'm sure those listening and watching, if they want to get in touch with your Celebrant, with you as a coach, how can they reach out?
Yeah, so I've got a Facebook page, so Your Celebrant, where I'll read a bit of poetry. You'll hear a bit about my story, warts and all. So you can do it that way, and all the details are on there, as well as the website. And yeah, it's an honour to connect with people. It all starts with a conversation. So yeah, thank you, James, so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure to speak to you and get to know you a bit more. I thought I knew you very well, but I didn't, and I've gone to learn a few more things. But thank you for sharing, and I'm sure, sharing something like Don's, story in itself, and the story of you experiencing that's something really, you've had to be really vulnerable. So thank you for opening that up for those to listen into. And yeah, I'm very excited to see how this next chapter unfolds. But thank you for taking time with your day to come and have this conversation.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr.